Hello everyone and welcome to another Premier Pundits podcast. Of course, it's me, looking really slick, Ben Dinnery, sharp as a dart. However, my esteemed co-host, Mr. McKenna, what's going on? The barbers have been open since Monday. We're now 3 days in and it's still looking a little bit unkempt, shall I say. And as much as it is, it's great to see your face again. I expected something a little bit more in keeping with the Mr. McKenna that we all know and love.
Well, I'll tell you what, Ben. I've just been working hard, trying to get good content out for everybody listening and, for saving my haircut. Maybe this should be an offer. In thanks of my work, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Make sure to like and share and subscribe because, I have been working hard here behind the scenes, as you have as well, Ben. But, I just don't look as sharp as you this week. But I promise I will have a sharp haircut by next week. I might even during this week as well if I can fit it in. But it has just been a little bit hectic and everything. And it just feels weird as well that barbers are open, restaurants are open. It feels surreal, but also fantastic news with that. But as we move with the news, hopefully fantastic stuff. We're talking about defences in this game week 32 discussion, a double game week for some teams. But I think there's only one team that you realistically want to bring in. But having a look at it, just before we get into actually analysing the teams, we're going to go back to some of the data that we discussed in our data analysis. And when Ben and I were looking through the data for the when teams had nothing to play for in game week 30 to 38, we looked at the fact that teams concede more, they score more, and it's a more interesting time, especially when teams have nothing to play for. And at the time, you and I discussed whether teams like Crystal Palace, Wolves, all those kind of teams would think that they've got nothing to play for, basically, because this season for some teams has been a bit of a write-off. Just get through it and get into the next one because it's been a difficult one. And so far this season, we've seen a ridiculous glut of goals. So looking at game week 1 to 29, there was 1.3 goals conceded per game. Since game week 30, and obviously it's only a 2-game week range, but there's a lot of games in there from, really tough fixtures between teams that are quite close in quality. West Ham, Leicester, you'd think that could have been a tighter, more cagey affair because it was Champions League one. But then there was also, top versus bottom in terms of like Chelsea versus West Brom. And there's been 3.88 goals conceded per game during this time. So the other interesting thing is 0.31 clean sheets per game. So every third game you'd expect a clean sheet from game week 1 to 29. That has gone down to 0.1 clean sheets per game. So thinking back to our data, how do you think that this will continue, Ben? Because it's quite anomalous, but this is a very strange season when you kind of factor in all the problems with COVID and fatigue and everything else.
Yeah, and on top of that, we're also coming to the point in the season where this is the business end. It is shit or bust, dare I say, and there's no point in sitting on the fence anymore. Teams have got to go out there and try to get 3 points. If we look at, say, West Bromwich Albion have been a great example for that since into this final series. 2 results, 2 great wins, 8 goals. Is that Sam Allardyce throwing caution to the wind and think, well, we need 3 points. Even a draw isn't good enough. So let's go out there and attack teams on the front foot and see what we can do. You would expect and you need, Scott Parker to be telling his guys the same. Although, mathematically they're still in with a chance. But in terms of their form, they're not able to get that ball in the back of the net. Alexander Mitrovic hopefully can replicate some of that form from the international break. But, like I say, now there's no hiding place. So teams have to go out and win. You might as well get beat 4-0 as, and try to win a game as opposed to maybe just picking up a point that's maybe neither here nor there. Goal difference isn't going to be a huge factor. during this. I think it's going to come down to points, certainly down the bottom end of that table. So yeah, it comes as no surprise when you also factor in, that level of fatigue. And that's not just about players who maybe aren't able to perform at optimal levels in terms of high intensity running and distance covered, but also around the decision making, why you're seeing maybe players are making mistakes towards the latter part of the games. Just that lapse in concentration. We know the Premier League, how fast and how dynamic and how energetic it is. And we're talking about top quality players throughout. So when chances and mistakes are made, inherently a lot of those chances are being taken.
So looking at it as well, the data and everything, I was coming to the conclusion that probably there'll be about 2, maybe 3 maximum clean sheets per game week. And so we kind of talked about this at the time, but people need to move away from the classic. There was a bit of conservatism towards the middle half of the season where teams were defending a little bit more. There wasn't as many goals let in, but even Chelsea now seem to be letting in a goal every week. Just at the moment, there might be a little bit of a downturn, but everything seems to point that this will be a highly anomalous. Probably it won't be the same next season and the season after when things are more normal, but it is pointing to a very high goal scoring period, and so we need to shift our attentions from the back lines up further the pitch, play 5 midfielders, a lot of attackers, get as much attacking potential there as possible. And your point, I think, rings really true, is those defenders that you do get in, they might be slightly more premium. They might be the Alexander-Arnolds, they might be the Robertsons, but they've got a chance to score as well. And we saw that with TAA this week as well. He did a fantastic job, but I do want to start with the team that does have the double game week this week. It's Spurs. They're facing Southampton and Everton. And of the defensive assets, Reguilon is actually the most owned in the top 10k. And I would say he's the most realistic one that you'd want to get in if you were going to get them in. But I have a big problem with Tottenham. So looking at them, the first question is, obviously, it's nice for this double game week. There's the double chance of 2 clean sheets or double output of returns. But do I want them in the long term? And I don't think I do, because looking at the previous end of season data, there's, as we said, a lot more goals, but also Mourinho's men have struggled to stop the goals, especially of late, even before the international break. The fixtures are quite good towards the end of the season. I think Tottenham about 5th or 6th best in terms of the difficulty of running. But since game week 24, the side only have 3 clean sheets in 8 games, but have conceded 13 goals, which is much as Crystal Palace, which you and I have kind of almost written off this season, Ben, as just kind of a team that will be happy to get to the end of the season and stayed up. So this is really worrying. They seem to be unable to defend a lead as well. It's kind of almost been a criticism that Mourinho's lost that, I don't know, fighting ability. There's also seems to be infighting once again between Mourinho and his men. There's not a lot of positives there. I think the only one that's kind of chugging on nicely is Harry Kane, because he's that good, and Heung-min Son to a lesser bit, but even he's gone on a goal scoring drought. And also, if you look at the XG conceded over the last 4 game weeks, Tottenham are at the bottom of the table, even worse than Sheffield United. So Reguilon, I don't think he's going to be that involved with creating goals. So I don't think you can even go, right, well, at least he has that ability. He's not like a TAA. He's not kind of in and around the box or that creative. It's hard. It doesn't seem to fit with my team, my ideology that I'm going to be looking at the long term. What do you think, Ben?
I've got 2 points, really. First and foremost, if I'm looking at a back line and I want stability and I want a level of consistency, I want to see that back line established with a pretty solid back 4. I need to know who my starting 11 is, as a fantasy manager going into the game week. We just don't get that at Tottenham at this moment in time. Alderweireld wasn't involved last weekend. Week before, it was a late return from international duty. We've seen Dyer come back in. Davinson Sanchez disappeared from the matchday squad completely last weekend. So there's that. We've got is it Rodon that came in and he's looked okay. You've got the other two fullbacks, Ben Davies and Matt Doherty, carrying injuries. So Matt maybe eases a little bit of pressure. I do own Reguilon. I brought him in on my wild card a couple of game weeks back, but he's sat on the bench, hasn't been involved for me at all. On the right-hand side, you've got Serge Aurier, or Jose Mourinho's actually had Tanganga in there as well. So for me, I just don't see, like I say, that level of continuity that breeds that consistency in terms of, being able to lock in those clean sheets. So I'm in total agreement with you. However, the silver lining on the cloud for me, potentially, and it is a potential because there's a lot of things that can factors to consider. First up, we have Everton. I think the game's on Friday. Now, Everton suffering massive injury problems at this moment in time. Very lucky to scrape a draw down at the AMX on Monday night, nils each. Some last-ditch defending. If those players don't recover and return for Carlo Ancelotti's men, we're talking about DCL. We're talking about maybe Alan. We're talking about maybe Gomez. We know that Mina's out. Josh King as well, who could have came in off the bench. He had picked up an injury. So there are several players at risk of missing out. And also you factor in that Jordan Pickford might be back in goal for the Toffees, which I personally think is it would be a positive for Tottenham, because I do like Olsen and I just don't like Pickford. So there's that to consider. So maybe on paper it looks a tricky fixture, and it will be if Everton are somewhere near full strength. But if they're not, Tottenham will be rubbing their hands at that. And then we face Southampton. Now, Southampton come off the back of a terrible result last weekend, torn apart by West Brom, fully deserved, the 3-0 defeat, and should have been more if the truth be told. Now, they're playing in the FA Cup first up this weekend. Now, Hasselhutten's got, may look at this as, right, well, do I freshen my side? Do I bring some of those fringe players in and see how they perform? Now, if they perform well, he could carry that lineup over to the Premier League, and we could see a different Southampton team to the one that got beat off West Brom. If it doesn't, what then does Hasenhüttl do? And it almost seems as if I expected Southampton to kick on with those players back in the squad, the Danny Ings of this world, but they seem to be treading water a little bit, and maybe the FA Cup is proved to be the distraction. So, if Southampton win and the focus then is more towards the FA Cup and just making sure that we're, we'll go out, we'll do a job, but we're maybe not getting involved in the down and dirty stuff. If there's a 50-50 tackle there to be won, are we sort of pulling out of that? Are we avoiding? And again, Tottenham may look at that and go, well, actually, there could be a good 6 points up for grabs here. And that just changes the whole complexion of the recent narrative about Tottenham and about Mourinho and this, that, and the other. So, look, a lot of influencing factors that could determine, and I'll be taking a punt on Reguilon just because he's already in my team, and the potential there of, maybe a double game week blank, which would be great.
I mean, that seems to be the thing this season. It is trendy to have a double game week blank. Getting in somebody, from Man City, they've got all this thing to back them up. I mean, maybe you're going against the trend here, going with somebody that probably shouldn't do well, but might do well. You're kind of, once again, being differential dinnery, breaking the thinking of the FPL community and doing something very unique. And in terms of Southampton themselves, we might have to put them on the list. So talking about defences here still, but maybe in the context of Tottenham as well, we might have this year's whipping boys towards the end of the season. We used to talk about Norwich a few seasons ago. We talked about Swansea, other teams, just through the years of the Premier League. And they've conceded 32 goals since game week 21, which is 10 more than the next worst defence of Sheffield United with 22. And it is for good reason. They've let in the second most big chances conceded in that time. Looking at it, though, their XG conceded was only 19.42. So they've really hugely underperformed. and I think this is something that you've said to me many times, is that Alex McCarthy is not a great goalkeeper, and this is why they brought in Forster between the sticks, to try and steady it. But again, that causes me worries because there's no kind of setback line there as well with Southampton. So I think kind of chalking up with Crystal Palace, we've already said watch out for teams playing Crystal Palace. They're a good captaincy option. Watch out for teams now playing Southampton. They don't have much to play for. Like you said, their focus is basically on the FA Cup. They're safe this season. And when teams have nothing to play for, as our data shows, they concede a lot more. And it's just great viewing for the neutral, and for people kind of getting involved with that. We do have to move on to West Ham. I'm thinking at the moment, in terms of the makeup for my team, I'm going to move away from having as many defenders in my side, premium ones. So Cresswell, I think I might replace with Arthur Masuaku. But the thing is, Cresswell is one of these players that can be creative, can get involved, but he did come off with an injury. So this has been factored into my thinking. So what is the injury news with Cresswell? Is the Masuaku transfer actually a good idea?
Cresswell had a scan on Monday. We're still waiting for the outcome of those results. Initial reports suggest that it isn't too serious, but given where we are at this stage in the season, something which isn't too serious could easily still mean 2 to 3 weeks on the sidelines. And again, but you look at the bigger picture. West Ham pushing for a Champions League qualification spot. Already missing Declan Rice, already missing Mikel Antonio. If Cresswell was a 50-50 punt, then I think, David Moyes and the player would probably be prepared to take that risk. Given, like I say, we'll come to the end of the season, and if we could lock in Europe, and then he's got so many months to recover. So there's that to consider down the line. Masuaku, for me, I like him further up the pitch. I don't like him anywhere near that sort of defending third. He's got too many mistakes in him, as we seen last weekend. So the thought of him maybe dropping in at left back or playing the left of a three would be a worry. He does have Fabian Balbuena, who could come in and slot in alongside Dawson. I don't recall the other West Ham centre back off the top of my head, but we have obviously Koufal and then maybe Masuaku, who can play up there alongside Lingard, Fornals, and Bowen. And I like that. But like I say, the worry is if he drops back in there and, already I'm seeing maybe a West Ham defence which isn't as watertight as it once was, almost becoming completely porous with the possibility of Masuaku dropping in there. But Moyes does have other options which I think he might look to utilise and leave Masuaku up there.
Yeah, this is the consideration that I'm making with the West Ham defences. I think looking at it, they have not had a good run in terms of the last 4 game weeks. Their XG conceded is one of the worst in the league, but they are pushing for Europe. And it seems at the moment that they're pushing for it by scoring lots of goals, which is great, for people that own Lingard, Bowen, somebody that we said last week should be going in your teams to replace Mikel Antonio. I think Masuaku for me is all right coverage, but are you saying that he might not play at all, or is it just from a defensive aspect of actually getting points?
No, I think Masuaku starts, and like I say, I would like to see him deployed in that more attacking role. If he drops into a back three, or maybe the 5, then I think the possibility of a West Ham clean sheet diminishes considerably. Like I say, it might be Fabian Balbuena into a back three centre halves, with him playing a wing back role, which is better. Or maybe even Ben Johnson in there. Again, we're looking at maybe does Mark Noble miss out again this weekend? So, like Everton, West Ham have a few injuries in it, and it could determine how David Moyes wants to set up his team this weekend.
So, Ben, just moving on to the next discussion, and I do have to ask, maybe a personal question here, but how good is your impression of Matthew McConaughey? You'll see where I'm going here.
All right. Nailed it, by the way.
I think so. I think your impression was all right. But in terms of it, the reason why I bring it up is because everybody went from the Dallas Sellers Club last week to the Dallas Buyers Club this week. Everybody's trying to get him into their team. I think it was a hard week in terms of FPL, and a lot of people were really kicked in the teeth over it. But my warning is, obviously, Dallas, fantastic FPL asset. He's quite cheap as well, which makes me kind of inclined to play him in certain instances where people think, oh, maybe not. But up next is Liverpool, Man United, then Brighton, which I think is fairly cleanable, and then Tottenham. But with Liverpool, I think they're in good form at the moment. They might get a drubbing from, they might drub Leeds by a fair few goals, and then Dallas might get 0 or a minus. Manchester United, they're going to be hard to score against. I think they're one of the better defences this season. And so maybe don't get him in till game week 34. You could play him against Brighton. They're not very good at scoring. And there is also the ability to score. Tottenham, you can rest him at his 5.1 price. And then moving through to Burnley, Southampton and West Brom. That's a lovely run towards the end of the season. So just your thoughts there, Ben, and also just to say we didn't record that twice. That was obviously done straight. We definitely didn't try a few attempts at Matthew McConaughey.
Jesus Christ, if people think that we've actually been preparing that one and practicing it, can you imagine what take 1 and take 2 must have looked like? An absolute horror show. A lot of chatter with regards to Dallas. I've seen a few people getting caught out by last weekend's early deadline, and they still had Dallas as captain from the week before, and so dodged a bullet on that front. And if we've talked about if we're looking at defenses who aren't keeping clean sheets and the potential of maybe defenders who bring also attacking returns, then it's hard to overlook Dallas. And if Dallas and Leeds can produce against the Manchester City team, champions elect, with 10 men, then you know what? Then maybe, why can't they go and get a result against Liverpool and Manchester United as well? I expect a really tough game against Liverpool. Manchester United, they've still got that Europa League involvement as well. So again, there are lots of other factors that are coming in consideration in terms of selection. We know that Rashford is carrying ongoing problems. We've seen Ollie rest Greenwood last weekend. Cavani will struggle to play games in quick succession. He might want to protect Bruno. So I wouldn't take any, fixture difficulty rating as gospel at this point in time. You really need to look at those and then consider, other factors into potentially what could maybe impact a manager's selection or, in terms of their strength and depth of their squad, because it's not all black and white. During this run-in, there are so many grey areas that you need to consider. It does require just a little bit more work and understanding of the bigger picture.
Maybe referencing another McConaughey film, Interstellar, Leeds seem to be a Murphy's Law team. Anything that can happen will happen with them. They just seem to do everything. So, I think Dallas is an all right own. I would be reluctant just to bring him in this week. There's other priorities in my team. The fact that Neto is injured, Antonio's injured, it's pretty bad. So for me personally, but I don't hate getting him in. Yeah, maybe for the Man United game, it's all right then. Maybe I shouldn't be focusing too much on that big red blinker on there because, Man United at times can be stifled. Leeds are an incredibly good side, and he is exactly in the mould that we're looking for of a defender that can score. Clean sheets, not so important now because I just don't think that they're going to be coming about. So we're kind of half in the Dallas Buyers Club then. I mean, realistically, are you going to get him in your team this week then, Ben, or do you have other fires to put out as well?
I mean, I wild carded only 2 weeks ago, so the team that I set up during that wild card was one that I pretty much seen would see me through for at least the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks, injuries and suspensions dependent. So Dallas was never really on the radar, if the truth be known. I'm fairly happy with the backline that I've currently got. Um, but we have team news to come. We have a set of press conferences to come up, and should there be maybe one or two doubts or concerns, ahead of this game week, then yeah, I wouldn't be totally averse to maybe throwing Dallas in there. He's an option. I've got TAA, I've got Dina. He would be another welcome addition at that back four.
A good goal-scoring defender. Looking at, you've mentioned TAA there, somebody that we've both been quite, interested in. I think people are still sleeping on him a little bit because of his price point, but you have to look at him as, he's slightly more than somebody like Pedro Neto or Rafinha, but he's got such a high ceiling. My question to you, Ben, is Phillips. A lot of people are talking about him as a cheap Liverpool enabler. A lot of people are now considering, right, you have to have a Liverpool treble up. Jota, TAA, Salah, but Phillips is being thrown in there as well because obviously he's dirt cheap. But do you think he's going to keep his place in the team? Because I'm not so sure. What do you think on him?
I mean, he looks to be settled. He looks to be into that backline, certainly for now. The big question is, who's Jurgen Klopp bringing in terms of those players who are maybe out injured. He's not going to drop Fabinho back in there. I think Fabinho's role in that midfield is far more important in terms of a shield and then, the pressing. Jordan Henderson doesn't look as if he's going to be back until at least the end of April, maybe beginning of May. That would be the other possibility. And then with regards to the other centre-backs, your Van Dijks, your Gomez and your Joel Matip, well, that just ain't happening. So for me, I think it's, Jurgen Klopp will be looking at it and saying, right, well, let's give this lad some minutes in his legs. It's a great experience. The pressure's off almost. They're still pushing for maybe European qualification place, but City's walked away with a title, and they've had an indifferent period that's took them out the limelight a little bit. So the crowd aren't there, and people will say that's not. They've maybe suffered from that, but on the flip side, the pressure isn't on those players, and you have young players coming into the squad, and it's a different dynamic. They can play with maybe a little bit more freedom. They can maybe try things that ordinarily they wouldn't want to do for fear of being lambasted by maybe 50, 60, 70,000 screaming fans. It's an opportunity just to go out there and maybe enjoy the football a little bit more. And I think Jurgen Klopp could use this period to allow Phillips to do that. And at his price point, it's a no-brainer. To be honest, if you're thinking about as in terms of enablers, there aren't many better in the game at this current point.
4.1, and this allows you to put the money elsewhere, like we said up front, which we'll talk about tomorrow in terms of assets there. But in terms of it as well, Liverpool have got a fantastic set of fixtures, so it's a great one. TAA, just bring it back to him as well. 10 chances created in his last 4, 3 big chances in that time, 27 minutes per chance created. He's on sensational form, isn't he, Ben? I think he has to almost be template now, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, a player that I would never have ordinarily entertained in terms of looking at that my anti-template differential type model. But when his ownership went down to around about maybe 12 or 13%, which is almost unheard of in TAA, that is a differential for Trent. And I just looked at these fixtures and I brought him in. I think he returned a clean sheet on his first game and he got his goal last weekend. I honestly didn't think he looked great in terms of his overall performance last weekend. I thought he was a little bit slack. I think he's trying a little bit too hard maybe he's listening to, that media narrative, and he's maybe feeling the pressure a little bit, or maybe he's just a little bit fatigued, or maybe he's, things just don't click into place, and we're expecting maybe a lot more given the level of performance over the last couple of years. But for me, he was definitely worth the punt. I'm happy with my investment, and he will see me through until the end of the season. And glad that I pulled the trigger nice and early on him.
Yeah, he's a great own towards the end of the season. Well, I think we're coming to the end of this discussion of defences. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Ben? Maybe any people that have caught your eye, or any injury news that the community just need to be aware of?
I haven't been a big fan of Wolves during this season, but maybe I'm seeing them a little bit tighter. Maybe the loss of Neto and the injuries, maybe the emphasis maybe more is just, again, just continuing to play maybe that more passive style and using the explosiveness of Adama Traore. On the break, we've seen Pundits back. So maybe that 4 with a 2 with Den Donker and what would be Moutinho now, with Neves currently sidelined through COVID. They may attract some attention. They're certainly a team to watch. Bowley should be back, although I'm not sure if he'd be back in the starting 11 this weekend. It will depend on his fitness. Nouri would be the obvious player to make way, with Sias moving out to the left, if that's a route that you wanted to go down. Chelsea, I'm cooling my interest with those. 2 weeks back, it was all aboard the Marcus Alonso train. Let's all steam into him. And even then, I had my reservations. Well, is he even nailed down as a starting berth? I think we've now seen Ben Chilwell start the last 3 games. And on the, that's, the both 2 in the Champions League, and then the 4-1 win at Palace. So again, there's question marks with regards to who will start at left back. And that's the centre back pairing. I just don't know who it's going to be. So I would be staying away from Chelsea, staying away from City, just because Pep, we're talking about rotating 60% of his team week in and week out, game week to game week, when you take Edison out of the equation. So yeah, it's difficult other than the ones that we've covered, mate. Even Burnley looking a little bit vulnerable. If Newcastle can score twice against them, then Alan Saint-Maxim, basically, if he, then, you do have problems. So, look, I think you're going to need an element of luck during this run-in. And for me, going back to what we've said for the last couple of weeks, maybe try to look for somebody who's going to bring you attacking or offensive returns, because clean sheets are going to be slim pickings between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, I think it goes back to our introduction of clean sheets, 2 or 3 probably each game week, which is crazy, but that's just the situation that we're in. You've got to exploit that, take that advantage and put your money elsewhere in your team. 3 at the back just seems the sensible thing to do. And yeah, just adding to your Chelsea thing, there was that worry of rotation, and now they've gone from one of the best defences in the league. They still got a good XG conceded of 2.02, but in those 2 games since we've come back, they've conceded 6. I mean, what do you think is the explanation there, Ben?
I don't think it's easy just to sort of pin down to one specific problem. You can look at individual mistakes. You can just talk about elements of luck. That West Brom game was an anomaly, really, wasn't it? That Tuchel said that they outperformed them across all of the metrics other than the goals. Did they go into that game just thinking it was going to be a walk in the park, having been unbeaten? I think it was 14 games since Tuchel took charge. I still don't like the fact that they rotate. Your Zumas, your Rudigers, your Silva. I know he's been injured. Your Christensen's for me, 4 games. 90 minutes every game, 360 minutes off the bounce. Tuchel comes out and he praises him, and he says, "Oh, look, I've been so impressed with how his performances when he comes in and then drops him. You know what? For me, what's kind of message does that send out? I know it's a squad game and this, that, and the other, but if you're going out there and you're performing and you're getting your clean sheets, then you deserve to remain in that team on merit. And there's maybe elements that just think, well, you know, why bother? Why bother going out and doing what I do? Because I'm going to lose my place anyway. So there could be that subconsciously. Christensen might be thinking, well, I'm off in the summer because I'm at the stage in my career where I don't want to be sitting on the bench. And if I still feel that I can offer something to somebody at the highest level, and I'm getting that opportunity to do it week in and week out, then maybe I want to look elsewhere. Because for the majority of players, they want to be in that starting 11. And because that's their job. Why bother training 5 days a week for you then to sit on a bench at a weekend? It's or maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just my mentality. But I would forever be wishing a teammate get injured and play shit if I was on the bench, just because I wanted to be out there to pick. I don't really care about anybody else. It was all about me. And and that's being truthful. And a lot of people would, I'm not talking about serious injury. I'm just talking about a little niggle.
Yeah.
But I would always want to be playing, always. And even if it meant moving, dropping down a league or what have you, then for me it was just all about the game.
It's interesting to hear that perspective, Ben, and maybe that has leaked into the Chelsea players' mentality. But from our perspective here, that is all we've got for you this week in terms of defence. Make sure to stay tuned to the channel because we'll be coming out with attacking assets tomorrow. We'll also have the Q&A session, so make sure to get your questions in, and Dr. Raj will be appearing as well a little bit later this week because of the weird game week that we do have ahead. So just from me, I wish you the best of luck with your teams. Maybe not as much luck as I need at the moment, and I'll steal some of that luck from Ben as well. Not wishing you an injury, but maybe wishing that you don't have as many points as me, because you're right there, chasing me down in terms of FPL. And just handing it over to Ben to sign us out.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Another great podcast. Really enjoyed it. So that's defensive assets done. Attacking assets will be dropping ahead of the game week 32 deadline. And like you say, keep your eyes and ears open and peeled for socials, because we will be doing a Q&A. So if you have something specific that you want us to have a look at, then make sure that you get those thoughts down. But for now, done. Alrighty.